There she is.
Hi.
I know it's the Sunday
It's
primps.
like, okay,
How are you?
good. How are you?
Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. Okay, so we are going live. We're gonna get this. I'm excited to, or not excited to hear, but I hear that you have to make a journey to the airport as the holidays come to an end. But for
Yes.
everybody that's joining us, we'll wait, give them a few minutes. But how are your holidays?
Holidays were good. The work is in full throttle mode. I was glad to disconnect for a couple of days because it's been very intense and it's still a lot of, I still have some very emotions and there were a lot of I lost quite a few people in 2020 that were very, very
Oh,
dear to me. So I think it's just like a lot of people in the world, right?
yeah,
Finding that new normal, making those adjustments. Adulting sucks. That's what it
yeah.
comes down to.
For sure. And, I still to this day, holidays just come with a weight.
Mhm. They
I think when you are somebody who is almost nurtured in grief,
Mhm.
as much as you can even prepare for it,
Right.
there's just like a heaviness. But we are here. We are live. My name is Kate Atwood. For those of you all who are joining us from our Talk About Lost channel, and all of Wendy's fans, I know are going to be joining us as well. I'll just
Hi,
start with.
Elizabeth.
There's Elizabeth. I'll just start with a little bit of a background on what brings us here today. And Elizabeth and I are co-founders of Talk About Loss, and we are both students and teachers of grief, and teachers just purely by experience. I
Mhm.
think anything that is birthed in our lifetime often comes from somebody who walks a path that looks back and sees that it could be better for somebody
Right.
else. And I think Elizabeth and
Right.
I came together as sisters who had experienced profound loss early in our life,
Mhm.
loss that shaped how we move through the world. And we both saw that there was a better way to do this.
Yes.
There was a better way to connect around grief, a better way to grow through our grief. And that really fundamentally started with our ability to talk about it.
Right.
So Talk About Loss is our platform to start to get that engine going. And I'm super excited because today we have a dear friend, somebody who I can now call a business partner.
Yeah.
um, but somebody who's been a creative inspiration to me for years here in Atlanta. But Wendy and I recently connected over our own sisterhood of grief.
Yes.
And I have to say, Wendy, I think it's quite interesting that, we can be so close in such proximity and not know that we have these roots that tie so much of our
Mhm.
experience together. But I think as we shared when we first had that exchange about losing our moms, for you guys
Mhm.
joining us, Wendy's going to share her story, but really what bonds us most is we lost our mothers. We both lost our mothers at the age of 12.
Yes.
And I have come to learn through my studies that that is the most impressionable developmental age for a young woman.
Mhm.
And I'm very passionate about that. And I know Wendy is too. So
Yes.
Wendy is joining us today to share her story of loss through the lens of love and through
Yes.
how, the loss that she has experienced has shaped her life. So Wendy, please introduce yourself and we would love to hear your love story.
I'm Wendy Eley Jackson, and I'm actually from Atlanta. I'm an Atlanta Public Schools graduate. I'm very, very proud about that as well. And my mother was very active as a parent, and very much so in my life. She worked part time. She was a real estate broker, and uh, I can remember she died of a cerebral hemorrhage known as an aneurysm. And I remember she died October 2nd, 1982. I was 12 years old. I was in the seventh grade at Sutton Middle School,
Mhm.
right there
Mhm.
on Jet Road in Buckhead. And it was a Saturday morning when she passed away. I remember feeling, let me preface it by saying this. So my father was a pilot for the FAA, and we had buried her mother in January of 1982. And my mother talked to her mother every day.
Mm.
So she was already grieving her mother's loss. And it was October of the year, and if anybody, all those listening in from Atlanta, you know the changing of the seasoning. So she was having these headaches for about 2 weeks, and her doctor wrote them off as, oh, it's just your sinuses, you know, it's that time of year. But she had an aneurysm. And so when it became fatal for her, I had gone to the bus stop for her to pick me up from school.
Mm.
And it was her boss picked me up. And she says, well, I've got to take you to Piedmont Hospital. Your mom's sick. And I remember getting there and seeing my father with his head in his hands. And I'd never seen my father cry before. And he had been given the news that she probably wasn't going to make it. And they said, well, 24 hours we'll know. And my dad said, well, that was on a Friday. That Saturday, I went off, I cheered, I came home. But when we drove home, it was one of my mother's friends. There was nothing but cars in front of our house. And I think she knew, my mom's friend Connie, she knew that what had transpired, but I didn't. I was just like, oh, Mom must be home. What's, going on? And my father met us at the back door. And he says, Mommy didn't make it. Wow. It is 38 years later, and there's a part of me that's still that little girl.
Mm-hmm.
Still that little girl. Forgive me. So, I was raised by my dad.
Yeah, it's a feeling that just comes back.
It does.
It
does, and it hits you.
Mm-hmm.
I told my dad later in life, I said, I think you were always my playmate, but now you have to be my dad.
Mm.
And because my mother was the Wendy, Atlanta Ballet, Ice Capades, all of those things. It was my mom that did all the running around. And so I had to learn, my father and I had to learn each other's, how we respond to different things. He had to, he was a man over 50 raising a 12-year-old girl by himself. And I will say this of the Atlanta community, my mom had great friends. And so many of them stepped up. Marilyn Holmes, wife of Dr. Hamilton Holmes of Atlanta, Margie Holmes, my mother's friend, Yvonne Wiltz and Laverne Bogans. They stepped up trying to help my father with the little things like, if she doesn't have a period, she's going to have a period. She's going to like...
I only laugh because, yes, I am so there with you. Yeah. My dad would go to the basketball game because I was a big basketball player. He would go to the games, and he would just sit with these moms, and he would ask them all these questions about like, Kate's going to get her period. Anyways, I giggle because I think our fathers probably would have benefited greatly from networking and community.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I have to say this is kind of funny now that I'm almost 51, but I remember him coming into my room saying, what is that smell? And what I didn't know was what to do with my sanitary napkins.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll relate to that, in that my father sent me into the drugstore the first time I got my period, and I bought the Depends, because I just thought I needed to buy the biggest thing possible. Because I didn't have anybody telling me these are the little things,
Right.
And I just
it's little things.
Yeah.
Those little things, the bra size, the breast growth. It was, for him, it was like, what do I do? And again, My mom's sister would lived in Tallahassee, Florida, and she became that surrogate, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I would spend my summers with her to give my dad a break after my mom died. So in 1982, I lost my grandmother, who was very present in my life, her daughter, who was my mother. And there are a lot of things now that I'm older, I realize that I missed, right?
Yeah.
Like when I had my first child, there was, I think people did their best and they were just excited that, oh, Wendy's having a baby and I was 25 years old. But somebody needed to tell me, listen, you need to put her in a girdle. Otherwise, her stomach is not going to bounce back. Those are things that your mom tells you.
Yeah.
Seriously. So for all of you women out there that your mothers are not a part of your lives or you're experiencing grief and they've gone on, after you have a baby, I don't care how much pain you in, put on a girdle
Well,
because your body will not snap back.
It's interesting that you say that because I would love to ask that kind of circle of healing, how that was for you. I know as an adult who lost my mom, and I haven't had children, but it's something I've really wanted for me,
Mm-hmm.
and for my own healing, kind of
Mm-hmm.
that full circle moment, which may sound kind of selfish, but at the same time, I'm just curious for you, like, was there another kind of layer of healing when you did have your children?
Totally. Totally.
Connection. Yeah.
Although my mom's sisters, one sister came right before I had my kids and one came right after, there was no substitution for what would my mom think.
Mm.
You know, I felt like everybody tried to fill that void, but that void was still very present there. When I got married, that present
Yeah.
was really missed. And so many, it's amazing. I think I've read so many books on grief, and I would watch movies. Like there's a movie called Imitation of Life, where the mother dies and the daughter is still young. I think one of the things that really helped me, and I still do it, believe it or not, is I began to write in a journal all of my emotions, everything that I was feeling. I would write. I would write, and that became. My dad didn't know to send me to a therapist. That wasn't a big thing to do in the '80s, to go see a therapist to talk about grief. And I do remember one thing that I became a little bitter about. Um, I would cry a lot, as all kids. But I remember one time, it was when the first year that my mom had died, my dad said, "You cannot cry around me anymore." He says, "Because I
Oh,
can't
wow.
function." He said, "If you're
Wow.
sad, it brings me all the way down, and I can't be what you need for me to be and carry your." So he couldn't carry his grief
Right.
and my grief too.
Mm.
So I would
That
cry
is
when he
a
wasn't at
lot.
home. It
Yeah.
was. So I would cry when he wasn't at home. And if I heard the garage door going up, I would just dry my tears or I'd jump in the shower or something. But it got to the place where I could, I couldn't, I could talk about her, but if I was going to become truly emotional, I couldn't become emotional in front of him. And then now I'm in a different category because now I'm in the stage of my life where I've buried my mother, my father, and my only sibling. So to be
Wow.
a 51-year-old patriarch is
Yeah.
hard.
Wow.
I buried my brother 2 years ago. I buried my father 8 years ago. And my father and I were very, very, very close. He died of pancreatic cancer. And I think the most fulfilling piece where my mom died, and we weren't expecting it. She dropped me off at the bus stop. She took ill. She was gone in 24 hours. My dad had cancer. So I always say I need to write a blog called Walking My Parent to Heaven's Door. Because my father passed away in his house in my arms.
Mm.
And I sang him into wherever he was going. Hopefully it's heaven. Um, he always said, he used to say during those times, by the last 2 weeks, he lived 12 weeks, 33 days without water, 4.5 days without, 33 days without food, 4.5 days without water. But in that last stretch, he would say, are you afraid? And I would say, yeah, a little. He was just like, don't be afraid.
Mm.
He would always say, just don't be afraid. He says, I promise you, you're going to be okay. And he wasn't a devout man of faith, but towards the end, he became so spiritual. He saw things, he would tell me, I see things from a different lens.
Mm.
And he says, this is not the end. I would encourage anybody experiencing grief to find that thing that connects you to that person. Don't be afraid to cry. Cry is a natural release, right? But if you can journal how you feel, if there are questions that especially if you are, even if you're with someone and you may have lost a spouse, and you're raising your kid by yourself, you do need to get help, because, divorce is one thing. Being a widow is a long time. And my father didn't marry for another 10 years after my mom.
Wow.
He stayed, he never even brought a woman in the house.
Wow.
He felt like my mother had done such an exceptional job being a role model. He didn't want anyone else in that position
Mm-hmm.
that could influence me in a
Mm-hmm.
different way that would have not been in alignment. But you've got to allow yourself to feel every emotion, just like I've already cried here.
Yeah.
But you have to feel every emotion, and then write down all of those wonderful things that you remember about that person. You and I lost our mothers at 12. And some people have a hard time believing that I can actually remember my mother, but if I would still know her voice. I
Yeah.
even remember I started wearing Chanel perfume because that was her scent.
That, it's so funny. My mother had like designer imposter spray from CVS from like the drugstore. She was not like, she didn't have this like, real class, but I do sometimes, I do still go into like it was called People's Drugstore back then, and I do still go
Mm-hmm.
into
Oh,
the
yeah.
store, but I just like take a sniff of it. I think smell is one of those things. um and our memories are amazing tools for healing. I
They are.
One of the things that I wish I had, that I had lived in a more kind of, you know, therapeutic or woke world when we were growing up, was to understand that those memories, that thinking that, that imagery wasn't a threat, right? I
Right.
mean, I grew up really feeling like I'm abnormal. This is going to
Mm-hmm.
keep me from, being who I can be, like almost just that this whole experience was an obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
um, and now I when I try to mentor or just be an advocate or support, especially with young people, it's about understanding that there are gifts in all of this. There are
Yes.
gifts in this process, and it's not always going to feel good, but there are gifts. And so I'd love to hear from you, Wendy. You, I think, likewise have pursued an ambitious career. You've been very
Mm-hmm.
driven.
Mm-hmm.
um, what are some of those, like, what do you kind of extract from your life journey that you can say, I think I am more this way because of my loss, of my grief?
I I know. I always say losing a parent gives you crude oil.
Mm,
And crude oil can either be used for anything, and I've used it to turn in gasoline to fuel me forward. Um, I think one of the things, as ambitious as I am, and everything from my achievements in going to graduate school and wanting to be the best, and now that I'm able to be a professor and still talk to the younger students, is treating, I think it's nice to have the big career, and it's nice to have all of the accoutrements that make our lives comfortable. But what's, I think, the biggest gift my mother gave me was treating everyone with kindness.
mm,
You can be nice. Nice is a temporal thing because it's based on whether or not something has disappointed you. But being kind is who you are in a difficult situation when things, when someone doesn't necessarily deserve your goodness or
Mm-hmm.
your best. And I think with my kindness, empathy, inclusiveness, that has helped my career a lot. I am amazed at how many people, be it my students or people in my career path, that says one thing I love about you, I leave with, is that you're kind. You give me your time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I think I got from my mother. I still even have my journals. Remember the diary? Like Hello Kitty had a
Yeah.
diary and he had a little key, right? And I would remember, that's one of the things my mother used to, every time I left her, she said, Wendy, no matter what, be kind, be
Yeah.
kind. And that is something that I support even with criticism. And Kate, I've seen you do it when, and you're, as a C-suite executive, people can get really rough, but you always turn it back into something kind and
Mm-hmm.
show the better side of, yeah, this may not have happened the way we wanted it to, but look at all of this that's happening so well.
Yeah.
And I think because when you've been hurt so deeply by things that life can throw at you, by grief and loss, in order to continue to make it, you're always drawn to find that good, find that good that can propel yourself and the people around you forward. So
Yeah.
I think that's something that I relate with you. I know in my
Yeah.
talks with Elizabeth Shara, the same thing is,
Mm-hmm.
we've taken that grief and turned it into, from crude oil to gasoline, to not just fuel ourselves, but those around us. Because I think we have the ability to make an impact and an imprint on the lives of people that are struggling, uh, of how do I move forward? How do I, um, make the best of every situation? What's the motivation to get up and to continue to do? And for me, it is living another day as another opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gift. My mother
Mm-hmm.
was 41. When I tell young people,
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, my mother was Kim Kardashian's age when she died.
My mom was 41 too. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And I just passed that age, and that was an interesting
A
age. My
real
mom,
milestone.
yeah, yeah. Now my mom had cancer, so but I, even with cancer, even now that I know that, like, what the hospice bed signals, like back
Hmm.
then I was like,
Hmm.
there's no way your mom dies. Like, I literally was like,
Right.
in the same fashion, got called out from my school, seventh grade social studies class. And there just, there was not a thought in my mind
Right.
that this would, that she would die. I mean, at that age, our moms are not human. They're moms,
Right.
they're not.
Right.
Yeah. It's a weird thing to process. And I appreciate those words. I think, one of the things that, me being so curious about my grief, and obviously, in my journey, having started Kate's Club and trying to, really make the path easier for kids, is that, loss is a common denominator.
It is.
It is actually the one thing that can thread all of us together when so many things divide us. But I
Yes.
see two people walking in the world, and I see people who have had loss and choose to do the work and choose to understand that
Hmm.
and choose the path of healing. And that
Hmm.
doesn't mean you have to be like, awakened. And, it just means that you are a student of what this pain is, that you aren't somebody
Yes.
who's trying to avoid it. Um,
Right.
and then I see the people who choose to defy that natural, um, experience in life. And
Hmm. Hmm.
those are the people that I worry about, because those are the people that, are the ones that express anger, are the ones
Yes.
that, that want to divide and see it
Hmm.
better to bring people down. And, um, so, just as a leader, and we've talked about this, as a creative and a leader, it takes intentionality to say I'm going to lead with that sense of belonging. Like I'm going to
Yes.
meet everybody where they're at, which is that we've all come through this experiencing joy and pain.
Hmm.
And, how can we have the best experience from this?
Right.
And I know you're beloved in Atlanta for that. I think the community that you have threaded through your work, through your advocacy, through, just giving a voice to stories that have needed to be told. Um,
Hmm.
that's a big piece of your legacy, you know?
I believe everyone has a story,
Hmm.
right? And being able to communicate what that story is a gift. Everyone doesn't know how, they don't know necessarily what's the elements that people are drawn to for story, but everyone has a story, right?
Yeah.
And the greatest legacy I believe that you can leave with anyone with is imprint them with love and
Hmm.
kindness and be patient. Your time is the most valuable thing that we have because no matter what someone does or says, you can't get it back.
Right.
So being able to, I'm very, very intentional about my time.
Hmm.
My daughter always has gotten on me for years about being present.
Hmm.
Even, since she's been here for the holidays, I need you present. I need you present. I
Hmm.
need you present. And for a long time, all I could see was I need to work so I can be present. And finding that healthy
Okay.
balance.
Yep.
What is that? But making memories, being very intentional about making special memories, because those are the things that I can recall. My mom was a great cook. She was a great baker. And for holidays, cookies were the big thing, or setting the table, right,
Mm.
was a big thing. Just making the best moments you can with the people that you love. And creating something new. One of the things that this is my first year not doing it because I was away from Atlanta, but every year I would get new ornaments. And whoever was in part of my sphere, I would have them sign their name. So my Christmas trees traditionally are about 25 to 30 years of signed ornaments. And I can tell you most of those people are no longer with us. But I
Wow.
have a little piece of them,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. It's
So
amazing.
when you talk about intentionality, that's one of the ways I've just processed my grief. And now I look at my ornaments as like stars in the sky that I get once a year. That's the gift I get back from them. Although I can't have them physically, they're with me. And I
Yeah.
remember the moments of, you really want me to sign another ornament? Yes, I want you to sign another ornament. And they have the year on them. And
Oh, that's so awesome.
my treasured one is the one with my dad, 2011. And he signed, he says, I love you so much. Love, Dad.
Yeah.
And so, I've had someone ask me, what do you treasure the most? And I say, it's a Christmas ornament with my dad's name on it.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I love that story. Well, speaking of presents, I want you to be able to go and be present with your daughter and get her off. I know it's kind of, we're winding down from the holiday weekend. So I
Mm-hmm.
just have one last question. I would love to know, Wendy, um, how do we make this topic, how do we, especially, we're a country, a world that has experienced so much loss and so much grief. I just want to know from you, like, how do we make grief a topic that we see as more inviting, more inclusive to share, to connect around? We call this series "Everyone Has a Love Story" because we so are quick to share our love stories. Yet, there's with every light there's darkness, and loss is about love. I love that. I always say grief at its core, grief is love. We grieve
Mm-hmm.
because we held that capacity to love somebody so
Right.
much. So I would just
Uh,
love for you and to just share with our viewers, how do we bring this to a table where everybody feels like they can be comfortable and welcome to talk about their grief.
I believe that, everyone, no one will be exempt from loss. It is a natural part of life. Of course, you always want to share in a safe space, but find those people that in your life that's that safe space. You can even allocate a time to share stories. One of the things that I think helps us process grief is our writing letters. People we send so many emails that emails, yes, we can recall, but handwritten letters.
Mm.
We're going to live in a time. If you remember the movie The Bridges of Madison County, write a letter to your future self, write a future letter to your children, write a future letter to your friends, and give someone something that has your voice. And through giving, I think giving allows you to process
Mm.
what you're feeling, being in that moment. But in the future, what it does, it gives someone else something to hold on to remember, to touch, to smell. So get yourself some
Yeah,
stationery,
I love
put your
that.
scent to it, and
I
write some
love
letters.
that. So beautiful. And I couldn't agree more. I think when we let ourselves be of service, it's amazing how much we can heal ourselves. And so I hope, Wendy, you found a little bit of that today because you served us
Yes.
today in sharing. Um, I spent so many of my years thinking that I was the only person whose mom had died. And if
Mhm.
I can leave this world knowing that one young person, old person, no matter what age you are, knows that you are not alone, you
Right.
are not alone when this happens, that there's friendship and sisterhood and brotherhood out there,
Yes.
then I think we'll all be living in a healthier world. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining
Thank you
us.
for having me.
Yes, yes, yes,
Mwah.
yes. You can follow Wendy on Instagram. Keep up with her. She has amazing projects coming up in the new year around her films, and we're excited that she's a part of the Talk About Loss community. And we're wishing everybody a wonderful, wonderful, inspiring, and heart-filled new year. And we're here.
Yes.
We're here if you need to talk. We're here for support. So. Um, we offer that and we say goodbye for now.
Goodbye for not goodbye. Goodbye is final. We say so long.
So long. Until
So
next
long.
time.
Until next time. Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank
Bye,
you so
guys.
much for having me. Bye,
Yeah.
guys.